All right, guys, welcome to another edition of the Subseasonal Forecast Contest. Again, today is a special day where we have students from Rutgers and the University of Missouri. So we're going to focus on giving the students opportunity to share their forecast. And just in a second, I'm going to turn it over to Michael to kind of lead us through that process. But before we kind of go through all that, I know we're still kind of new at this. Are there any, did anyone have any problems? Are there any questions that you guys want us to review before we jump into this? And I should say too, just in case, I don't know, you think it's minor or whatever, definitely, if you don't bring it up now, please don't hesitate to email me later. For example, if you don't have a Maxar account, that, please let us know, because we definitely want to get you a Maxar account. If you're not getting the Monday MailChimp, you should be getting a Monday email, like a MailChimp email on Mondays that gives you some information about the forecast contest. If you're not getting that, please let me know, or let Sarah know, and she'll let me know. So any sorry about that. Any questions?
Any questions? No, I think we're good.
Okay, Michael, was there anything I missed in terms of stuff we wanted to ask them right at the beginning?
No, I think that was it.
Okay, again, if you think of something, if you're just, you don't want to interrupt right now or whatever it is, please let Sarah know or let me know after, and we could definitely spend time walking you through whatever the problem is. Okay, and with that now, I'm going to turn it over, or Michael, if you want to share your screen, and you can take us from here.
Yep. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So something we usually do, we haven't done it the last time you guys were here because we needed to answer a couple of your questions, but usually we'll start off by going over our most recent verification, which was the target window of September 22nd to the 26th. So I'll jump right into it. So overall, wasn't a great day for most of us, CRPS wise. Most of us were off by quite a bit, considering our verification was 18.5, most of us were in the upper 20s, a couple people were a little bit higher than that. So overall, a cool period. Only one forecaster had a positive score, and that was Matt Lanza. So we'll take a look at his forecast map. Overall, got a pretty warm picture in the, let's see, 2 of the 3 regions there, mostly the northern tier and the desert southwest. Let's take a look now to see, using Dynacast, to see how that matches up. So Matt seems to have gotten the warmth correct, mostly, but he did miss a pretty significant area of cold over the south, which is kind of, and Dave or Matt can correct me here, but that's kind of an important area, at least for CDDs at this time of year. So kind of missed that part. Kind of overall decent, I would say, pretty good forecast, but did miss that cold, just kind of hit a little bit there. And something else I wanted to show, so Dr. Lupo, he did have a negative score, but looking at his forecast map, he did capture that cool in the south. So the reason I wanted to show you that is just to show you that, you might have that positive score, and in this case, it's not like a super positive score, but, and you might also have, a negative score, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you had a bad forecast. And that was something we talked about last week, that, you might miss the number, but if you had the overall pattern right, that's still a pretty good forecast. So, moving on now to, let's see, so let's take a look. The CFS did particularly well this week, the most positive I've seen it in quite a while. So I wanted to cover to see how well the CFS did from both a temperature and 500 millibar perspective. So temperature-wise, you can see a little bit further to the west on the CFS than the actual verification in terms of the cold. But pretty much overall, I'd say that's a pretty decent verification. Got some warmth northeast, warm west, cool south, warm west, warm northeast, cool south. So I'd say overall it's a pretty decent temperature verification. Now let's take a look now at the 500. So this is our 500 millibar height pattern for the 22nd to the 26th. You can see decent high pressure off the New England coast, a little bit of a low, I believe that was a closed low, upper low, over the Great Lakes area, low over Alaska, and some ridging sticking into the west coast. So looking at what the CFS came up with, we have pretty close. You know, the ridge was a little further to the northeast than verification. The trough was pretty close. The ridge was pretty close in the west. Kind of missed that Alaska trough though, so that's kind of a big thing to miss. Let's see now how the Euro did comparatively. Temperature-wise, the Euro did not do particularly well this week. A lot of warmth. You know, captured the northeast warmth, but kind of missed a lot of that cool in the south, which was kind of an important detail, I think, for this particular week. Looking at 500, you know, did capture that ridge in the east, or rather around Newfoundland, a little bit further to the west than verification, but not too bad. But it did also miss that large Alaska low, and it also missed a lot of the ridging that pushed onto the west coast. So overall, a little bit of a surprise to see the CFS do so well overall. But something we mention here a lot is that the CFS, despite having fairly poor temperature forecasts, to say the least, does often provide some value with its 500 millibar maps, either the global or the Northern Hemisphere, whichever one you want to choose. But it does supply some value there. So just keep that in mind when making your forecasts. Also just take a look to see where this particular period ranked over the past 70 or so years. So our target was ranked number 47, I think that is, or 46, my mistake. So this was 46, so below both the 10 and 30-year normals, something that personally I haven't seen in quite a while, looking at these numbers. And Dave, when do you have a recollection as to the last time we've seen a verification this low?
Even I was a young kid. No, I don't remember. No, but it seems like it's been.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've had one like that, and we've been doing this for a couple of years now. So
I actually think we may have had a few of these in early mid-July this year, if I recall, but can't quote me on that.
okay, I mean, it just seems, you know, September. I think we talked about this back in August, I want to say, that September has just been so warm in recent years that you know, anything below the 10 years kind of a surprise at this point. For September anyway. All right, so let's see, was there anything else I wanted to show with this? I don't think there was. So unless somebody has anything else they want to add or ask a question on regarding the verification, I'm going to move on.
Yeah, actually, let's just take a quick pause.
Okay.
Because I think this is a really interesting forecast, but do any of the students or have any comments about this, comments about the analysis or thoughts on this forecast period?
I don't think that we forecasted for that time range. I think ours is going to be out next week when we
Okay.
first started our forecast contest.
Okay.
That is interesting to see.
Yeah, it is. And I thought, like, one thing that struck me, if Michael, could you I guess two things. Could you put back up the like the 500 millibar height pattern from the Euro versus verification? I thought you were quite generous with your evaluation of the Euro. I mean, yeah, I don't know if you can get them side by side, but either way, you know, the point is, right, this was not this is not going to go in the highlight reel for the ECMWF, right? Like it not only did it miss the temperature, but it really missed the pattern. I mean, pretty badly across the PNA pattern, right? Looking at the ridge in the west. Yeah, thank you, Michael. That's great. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you can see just the US pattern, right? I don't have to point it out. It's pretty clear, right? It's like 180. Not too great. Like Michael said, okay in Southeast Canada, but upstream from that, not so good. And I think so. I think this is an interesting forecast, and I'm glad you guys see it because, like I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly, but I think you guys know the ECMWF is in general a much better forecast than the CFS. There's lots of metrics that show this. We don't have to do this now, but including the metrics in our forecast contest, right? If you look back, you'll see that the ECMWF almost always seasonally performs better than the CFS. Not every forecast, clearly. This is a situation where the CFS beat it. But I guess the question that I have whenever I see something like this, because it seems like sometimes we can go 6, 7, 8 forecasts where the ECMWF is the same or better than the CFS. And again, don't hold me to that number, but a lot of times the ECMWF is better. And then all of a sudden you see something like this. And the first thought I have, and I welcome any thoughts on this too from anyone else, is this a case of the broken clocks, right? Twice a day. So every once in a while, you're going to look at the CFS and say, "Oh my God, it was like a perfect forecast." Like, did it know what was going to happen, or was it the broken clock? And the thing about did it know or did it have a clue? I guess that goes into some. I think the research potential there, as you guys think about potential paths of or research projects, things that potentially you could do now, or maybe more so down the road. But like, I would love to be able to isolate this and say, let me see if there's something about this particular pattern. Was there something about this that the CFS handles it better? You know what I mean? Like maybe because of the MJO setup that CFS handles that better. Or maybe there was something about the initial conditions with the 500 millibar pattern, or the time of year, or or with all of these things, or something with the tropical activity in the West Pack that the CFS, when that situation happens, it does better. And the reason that's so important is because if it's one thing if a year from now we go through this and you're like, oh, the CFS happened to do better this time of year. Should I weight the CFS a lot more? Well, you're going to have a lot more confidence on that decision if you know something about why it did better, right? Like, was there something about the precursor conditions, something there that the CFS latched onto versus just most of the time where the CFS doesn't do better. So again, I just think it's a really interesting case where the CFS did better. I don't know why. Does anyone else have any sort of thoughts on this period?
Yeah, I have something weird to offer. I was trying to remember back to this whole episode, and there was a point earlier in September where it looked like September was going to be like a top 5 warm month for the U.S., and this was a bit of a surprise forecast when that cooling came into the south. Like Michael was saying, it was a big impact on cooling degree days there, and it was one of those deals where even the 11 to 15 day models were incorrect. They didn't really pick up on this until the 6 to 10 days. So I'm not sure exactly how the CFS was able to kind of get that nugget out of that. But it was interesting. I felt like maybe the American models in general did better with it, and I think it might be tied back to, it's just my theory, it may not be true, but there was a recurving super typhoon early to mid-September, curving to just off the Japanese coast by around September 18th or so. I know there's only a handful of days later, but I feel like it may have altered the northern Pacific pattern just enough to allow some of that energy to dig more, directly into the eastern U.S. And the weird thing I've noticed this summer has been that the times when the American model has done better, it was with that Elsa storm in the eastern Gulf, Henri off the east coast. The extended range models of the American models have actually performed better than the European. They did an upgrade to the GFS that improved their tropical system forecasting and impacts, and it seems to be working. It's been a rare bright spot on the American model this entire summer. And so if I have any sort of debate between the two sets of models that involve a tropical system it's been kind of interesting, but we've been defaulting a little bit more to the American model side. So I don't know if that's where the GFS kind of initializes the CFS model. So I'm not sure if it was feeding that information into it and practical with that or not, but it's just something I noticed this summer. I thought was interesting.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great nugget.
It's
I want to
probably
add to
just a
that.
nugget. Yeah.
I want to add to that, Dave, and echo Matt's comments, and also make the comment that when we look at the European week 3 that we're going off of there, it doesn't really absorb or doesn't really understand the high frequency nature of what's happening in the tropics. It gets washed out in the way that the European model weeklies are run. They're much different than, say, the European operational 10-day. So what I see with the European, I asked Matt to maybe comment or validate this, which is that what we see often with the European in weeks 3 and 4 is it kind of goes back to a default position of its kind of quote unquote base state. The base state of the atmosphere right now is very La Nina-ish. And I think what we're seeing from the European, at least in these last 3 or 4 weeks of runs, has been to see it kind of default back towards that. Once you get past week 2, it kind of sees the synoptic pattern, and then by week 3, it goes to more of its what would be considered kind of its base state pattern of what you would expect in a kind of a moderate La Nina.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And the only times I see the European weeklies really do something notable, like out of the ordinary against those sorts of base states, is when there's a strong MJO signal, because the MJO is a big feeder into the European weeklies, I think. And but otherwise, if it's not a strong signal, then you're right. It just kind of shows the same default, which worries me a little bit because I've been watching the new NOAA GFS ensemble weeklies all summer long, and I feel like they're almost worse about that than the Euro weeklies are. They have shown the same default 16 to 30-day pattern all summer long. So, and they're going to use that to replace the CFS. And I know Michael you didn't have the GFS ensemble weeklies for that same 16 and 20-day forecast, but I'm willing to bet that the CFS did so much better than the GFS ensemble weeklies. They're just warm everywhere all the time, and so it's I hope they don't degrade the extended range guidance from NOAA if they move to this new system.
All right, yeah, I think that's great input and some possible research topics there for sure. So, Michael, I'll turn it back over to you because I know time's our enemy here.
Yeah, and I'll just kind of finish by saying one last thing from Matt's forecast. He does mention that tropics and MJO argued cooler for this particular period. So looks like to me a lot of signs pointing to the CFS potentially handling, at least in this particular instance, handling the tropics a little bit better than the EC. So with that being said, since we do have to get to some of the forecast groups, I'm gonna I'll jump into the forecast and then I'll do that afterwards. So looks like this will be our last week. Forecasting CDDs will be switching to HDDs on Tuesday. So I'll mention that in the email on Monday, just to remind you guys. But again, we'll be forecasting for HDDs starting Tuesday. With that being said, I'll jump right into my forecast. So my forecast was for 10.7 CDDs with a spread of 2.9. That's average spread. Same forecast formula as last week. 60% of my 10-year Euro blend, which is 70% 10-year, 30% Euro. 30% CPC forecast, which I will pull up. Wrong one, but that's true. Which shows some pretty broad warmth, but most of it's over the northern tier of the country, so not really any like super big population areas. Doesn't have Florida as above average, which is a big producer, and it's not too warm. Only 55% chance above normal for most of Texas and Louisiana, so I wasn't too confident with a lot of warming, so I made no changes based on the CPC. I also didn't make any changes based on the teleconnections, at least on when I looked at them on Tuesday. Everything was pretty much near neutral. Looks like the NAO is still near neutral. AO isn't really a factor in October yet, but still near neutral anyway. And the PNA, which appears to be having some difficulty even with initialization, is still near neutral. So didn't see anything really to deviate too much from my base number of 10.7. So I stuck with it, and I'll take a look also at my forecast map. I think I made a mistake here. Well, whatever happened here, I don't know. I can't explain that. Sorry about that. I think I made a mistake making that forecast map, but that's my forecast. Any comments, complaints, questions, or concerns?
That just goes to show that, even as meteorologists, we're all human. We're all going to make mistakes.
Yep, exactly.
So,
All right, so if nobody has any questions for my forecast and my fairly questionable forecast map, we might as well move on to the groups because I know you guys have a little bit of a time crunch. Does anyone want to volunteer to go first?
Yeah, I guess I'll go. I'm part of the MU2 group. I don't know if we changed our name or not.
it might be under Lauren, or is it under?
Yeah, it's under Lauren, I think. Yeah, there.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, it's the Lauren one.
Oh, hey, one thing before you get going.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. In which pod are you in? Which who's your industry leader?
Lauren.
Sorry.
Who's your professional?
What?
Do you know who your professional is?
Oh shoot.
Lauren, do you happen to know?
I think it's Max.
Max.
Okay. Okay, cool. And Max isn't here. So I was going to say, just to make this a little bit more formal, I think it'll help. And sorry, which student is that? Who's speaking?
Eric.
Eric?
Yeah.
I was going to say too, a couple of days, if he could come a little bit closer to the mic, that might help. And then I was going to say what we're going to try to do is, why don't you speak to one of the industry leaders, like, kind of like address them, because the more we can make this like a briefing, I think the more helpful it'll be. So not to pick on anyone, but how about you're speaking to Matt Rogers, so you could talk to Matt Rogers after Matt sort of after you finish your thoughts or briefing, and Matt has a chance to ask any questions he has. Anyone else can open up for questions too. But we just thought the act of trying to speak to someone might make it a little bit more of a real experience. So go ahead.
The mic over there.
Yeah, I think it's right here. You can sit right here if you want.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So many people that sit over there.
Yeah, that's much better. That's much better. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so again, I'm Eric Gallahan. Part of the group under Max. So the main things I were looking at here was the current drought off to the west, and that has to do a lot with the ridging off to the northwest as well. And I figured that was going to continue throughout the forecast period. And that's why I went with the above average temperatures on that. And then we're good.
Yeah, that wasn't me.
Okay.
I have no clue.
And then also when I looked at the Climate Prediction Center information, there it is. The 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 temperature and precip, they both pretty much matched each other. Warmer temperatures in the north and off to the west, and then drier conditions in the northwest. And if you look at the current map of the current drought map, you see the D1 and the D0 making their way into Missouri over the last couple weeks, and that looks to continue. It almost kind of looks like a mouth. It's kind of weird looking, but that the D1 and the D0 have definitely gained coverage over Missouri, and that looks to continue. However, my only argument to that though is we did get some rain here the last couple of days. Weather station on campus, I think, put out a quarter inch, so that will help with our drought somewhat. And this weekend we're forecasted to get some rain about a ½ inch or so, I think is what it's looking like. So that might lower our drought a little bit, and that could potentially lower our temperatures throughout the next few weeks into our forecast period. So if we end up getting some rain this week, and if that does verify, I would expect the temperatures to lower a little bit from what I'm looking at. But otherwise, kind of the same pattern as we are experiencing right now, just obviously cooler than what we're getting right now because October will be cooler, but above average and dry is kind of what I'm looking at.
So it sounds like you the dryness issue, the drought issue is probably your number one forecast tool there, or was it? I didn't
It
look at it
was,
closely.
yeah, it was. I looked at the drought monitor for this past week, and then I forgot to mention I looked at the 200 millibar jet on Maxar, and it's over southern Canada, and it looks like that's going to continue through the middle of October, maybe a small trough here and there, but it's not going to last very long. So that ridge over the west will definitely increase the drought potential. And again, that can continue into the middle of the country.
Was that the CFS model that you looked at for the 200 millibar forecast?
Let's see. It was the GFS 250 or 200 millibar ones on the Maxar website.
Oh, so that's through the 11-15 day then. Yeah, it's interesting. We've got a big trough heading into the western U.S. As you go into early October. The pattern's going to what we call a negative P&A. So you see that trough there going into the west. The only thing I'd say is be careful using drought as a forecast tool for temperatures in the sense, because it can be a double-edged sword. If you have really dry soils and you get a strong cool push out of Canada, it actually will amplify the cool weather as well, because it's a very dry air mass over a very dry soil. So you'll get a very large diurnal range. You'll get very, very cool low temperatures as well. So yeah, it's tricky to use drought for long lead forecasting. Unless, if you're going toward the summer, you might be able to do a little bit for ridge feedback and things like that. But when you're going away from the summer, I would be a little bit more cautious using that sort of thing, because the mid-latitude jet stream patterns start to connect up to other influencers from the tropics and things like that, and it just gets a little bit more complicated. But I thought your discussion sounded great, and you brought up a few different points that you looked at to bring that forecast together. It's a very difficult period to forecast for, so that was great that you brought all those different angles to it. So yeah, it sounded good.
So you're saying once we get late fall, early winter,
yeah,
that could lead to either extreme.
It can, yeah. For example, I'm just watching the European operational just came in a little bit ago for this big trough in the west next week, and it has Burbank getting lows in the 40s at the end of next week, which is probably overdone. But with dry soils, you have a better chance of doing something like that. So, and then people might turn on if they have them in SoCal, but they'll turn on their heaters. So pretty crazy.
Well, thank you for giving your discussion.
Yeah, that's all I have.
Yeah, thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or?
Just real quick, Sarah, do you know how many more groups we have on the Missouri side?
We have 2 more.
2 more. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to hold my questions just because I know you guys have 15 minutes, but if we have a little bit of extra time at the end, yeah, I have a question or 2.
That's all I have.
Okay, well, we'll keep the ball rolling then. Which group would like to go next?
The group for Clayton.
I'll stay on the cool side.
Who is your professional?
Matt Rutgers.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're part of, what's up? Come right here so they can see you. Where's this?
Oh, and then I'm sorry, and who's your industry leader?
Matt Rogers.
Matt Rogers. Okay, so for you guys, pretend Dave Darkangelo, right, who's on the call, pretend you're briefing him, so you can kind of address him, make it a little bit more real, and and Dave will ask you tough questions at the end.
Sounds good. So we're part of MU Group 1. It's under Clayton Lieberman is our forecast. And as you can see from our formula, we use 50% Dynacast and 50% CPC outlook. None of us felt super confident in our ability to kind of interpret the teleconnection. So we're straight away from that this week. Hopefully in future weeks, we'll input more of that. Can we get the Dynacast and the CPC outlook pulled up on the computer?
Yeah.
I think they're pulling it up.
Yeah, I think they're gonna pull it up for you.
Which Dynacast did you, just this or?
Temperature anomalies for 16-20 days. Yeah.
Yeah, average temperature. Yeah, I think this is
Is that what yeah.
this temperature departure. Is that fine?
Yep. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So we thought that both of those kind of agreed for the most part. I feel like that looks different.
I think it's more polar off the northwest than it was.
It was, yeah.
It probably was before you submitted your forecast, honestly.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, so this is a little different than what we looked at, but basically the same idea. We saw some pretty intense high temperatures in the Midwest, Northeast. The Northeast wasn't as high when we looked at it, but now it's even trending more that way. As far as the West Coast goes, we were looking at mostly normal, besides like Southern California was below normal. So that was our main concern for what would kind of mitigate what was otherwise a pretty high temperature outlook. So all in all, what did we put as our final? Do you remember?
I think 14.6.
Yeah.
I have it here if you want to see it, unless you can't see it up there. 14.8 was what you put with a spread of 4.2.
Yeah. So pretty high sigma. We weren't super confident in our forecast. And then as you can see on the West Coast Pacific, we have below average and then above average everywhere besides in the South Central. And oh yeah, we just looked at the average and we decided overall it'll probably be significantly warmer, but not record-breaking warmer than the typical for this time period. Anything you want to add?
That was great.
Nice job.
Yeah, good job.
Questions?
This is Dave Darkangel. Hey, that was good. I have one question for you though. Your number's 14 point something. Where does that rank in terms of like what's a like what would be an excessively hot period, or like what's like the highest number of CDDs we've seen for this time period?
I think the highest we saw was 19.
Yeah.
Because I know we were looking at our sigma and we knew it was gonna be warmer, but we didn't want to like put our sigma too high, because I think our first initial guess is like a 5 sigma, but I noticed that if we put 5 and it hits 5, then that just one sigma is gonna exceed the maximum that we've seen.
Okay, fair enough. And so that's good. And so you said your justification was 50% Dynacast, which is basically normal, right? Is that what what's Dynacast?
This
I think
model
that-
output right here.
Okay. And then 50% CPC, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's CPC. Okay, great. So I think you said something that's kind of interesting and important and it probably shouldn't be overlooked. And that's, you use the phrase, we're not comfortable right now using teleconnections, or I think you said something about like something to that effect.
Yep.
That's kind of a powerful statement. I think that, that we'll have time in this course to maybe dig into that a little deeper, but there's no fault or no shame in saying, hey, I'm not really clear on something, I'm uncertain, or, things are a little bit too vague, or using some language around that. As long as you have some justification to back up what you did forecast, it's completely fair sometimes to say, hey, there's just some things we're not comfortable with, rather than give like an offhanded remark of something that either isn't valid or isn't really accurate, or it's just like you're trying to make something up. I think that's a completely valid thing. And I think that's something that forecasters sometimes maybe don't feel like they use enough, because they're afraid to say or admit like, hey, something's too uncertain, something I don't understand. There's plenty of time periods in my career, and I think maybe Matt and Dave could agree with this as well, is that there's just sometimes where you just don't really know kind of either what's driving the pattern or kind of like what's moving things around, or you can see the models, you can interpret them, but I wouldn't say like there's not like a recipe for like how much you should use that, but it's pretty challenging to sometimes, or to admit, hey, I just don't know something, right? Things are too confusing right now. Uncertainty is pretty high. And, I'm going to give you some information of things I do know. And then, we're going to maybe wait and see how things develop. The good thing about being an operational forecaster is you kind of get to do this every day, and actually multiple times through the day. So it's not like you come in and, a weeks on end, you're saying, I don't know. It's just more of like, hey, given the information I see at the present, and that might change today, midday when we get new information, or tomorrow morning when we get new information. But right now, what I see at the present just isn't really making sense to me. And I'm gonna kind of maybe a little bit. Sometimes we do that. We play a little conservative and we don't take a risk. But you guys have a pretty, it's a fairly aggressive forecast. I think 14 is like a pretty big number. It's a fairly hot forecast. You're going to need some heat in the south to contribute to that because we're just not getting many CDDs in the northern half of the country. But I like it, and you had some justification, and that was pretty good.
Good job.
Thank you.
One thing I'll also add is just an aside. When looking at, especially at the bookend parts of the seasons where you'll be switching from CDDs to HDDs and vice versa, it's helpful to look also at the cooling and heating degree day maps, because this is what the cooling degree day map looks like, and it's a lot different than what just the average departure looks like, because you can see most of the country is not producing other than California and the deep south. It's just something to keep in mind in the future, just to not get too hung up on seeing, because I've done this myself. I see this map, oh, that's a lot of red, it's got to be a warm forecast. It still could very well be a warm forecast, but a lot of this area doesn't really matter at this stage, and this late into October for CDD production. That's just something to keep in mind. So I'm gonna keep the ball rolling here because I think some of you only have about 9 minutes left.
I do have a quick question though about something you just said.
Sure, go ahead.
How do we get to the map that shows the CDDs and everything? I see that it's on Dynacast, but could you show us how to do that?
Yeah, so you just it's just a couple below average temperature departure, and then you just build a map and it'll give it to you.
Based on the time range you put in?
Yeah, on October 13th. I mean, you can have any time range in there, of course, but yeah, so you can do any of these, and it'll just build the map directly in Dynacast.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Hey, Michael, can you also show Sarah the stripped version? Because I think that's a pretty cool thing to learn and see, where they show, broken down by day.
Yeah.
It's not on the Dynacast. It's if you go to product.
Right. Products, right. Is that the models page or is that the info?
Yeah,
I think it's the models page, right?
Yeah, exactly. And then go to
I think it's this one. Yeah, it's this one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this page, quickly, I can show this at the end, just because we're in a little bit of a time crunch, shows you from October 1st to the 15th, so 15 days, what the max are forecast, and this, I believe, is we have the GFS operational, and you can take a look. I think the Canadian ensembles, that might be new. I don't know if they've always had that. But it shows, different colorings. So they're thinking, it'll be a little on the warmer side. October 10th will be particularly warm. Then it'll add it up, the 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15 day, and 1 to 15 day periods. The degree days. I'm not sure if this is this might be an HDDs. I'm not sure at this point, but
if you look up top, Michael, a little higher, it'll tell you. I'm sorry. It actually says on the top left. So
okay. So this is HDDs. This is CDDs. So, they've got both here. You can, we've got GFS ensembles, and these will change as they update. And there's a color code here, and you can, get the numbers to see how yours would match up. If some of you do an 11 to 15, how it matches up with Maxar, but also how it matches up with the GFS ensembles, maybe the Euro ensembles, maybe even the Canadian ensembles. Had in our discussion last week, the Canadian was actually performing pretty well, comparatively speaking, to the Euro and the GFS. So again, that's something, if you want to take a look at that a little bit more later, we can. But for now, we'll have to move on to the final group because we got about 6 minutes left.
I'll speak fast. It was nice that you showed us the color coordination. That's how my brain works, and that's how I do things like with Excel and everything when I do my forecast. We're the directors, and our professional is Mr. David Michelangelo, and we pretty much. I'm be honest. There's only a couple of us participating, and so we're still trying to get all the kinks figured out and everything to work together at a at the same time and everything. But I kind of depended upon Mr. David this week that we forecast because I just got over being sick, and I do apologize for that. But what we did was our mean was 9.6 with a spread of 4.1, and we thought that, and I think in the email, it was email or text, Mr. David had mentioned about a typhoon over in the Pacific. I have it pulled up on my phone because I did not bring my notes. Was it this week that he mentioned that? No, that was the week prior. I did not do the, like I mentioned the first time that we all had a discussion where I got all the temperature data kind of forecasted myself for all the National Weather Service offices for the United States. I do, however, now have a computer program that will aid in forecasting. So Calvin, just to let you know that. So maybe we can all video chat and I can explain it to you and the other members of our group, including Mr. David, on how that could help us tremendously. But yeah.
What program is it?
It is actually a computer program that a previous student, his name is Chris, I don't remember his last name, Dr. Tony or Dr. Lupo, mentioned since I was thinking about that, instead of doing that type of stuff, like how long it took, mentioning to him, because he did the same thing. We kind of thought the same way, and he actually created a computer program using Python. And so I thought it was really cool. I had a meeting with him on Wednesday, so hopefully I can finish up my test that I have due today, and then get a better understanding of how to code with that, and then I will let you all know for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll ask you more about that after we're done. Just go ahead and finish the forecast.
Oh, that's fine. Let's see. We did see that there were going to be some cooling degree days, but nothing honestly would contribute tremendously for that. So that's why we forecasted the South to be above and the Midwest to be above and cooler over at the Pacific and East Coast, and about normal temperatures for the mountain range. Oh, and also we pretty much based our calculations to get the mean towards the 30-year average.
Hey, Sarah. Well, I guess I'm on the receiving end here of your briefing. This is David. Why is that? Why were you attempting to get it close to climatology?
If I'm just being honest, I don't remember.
Well, and let me ask you another quick question. It's related, so maybe the answer is I don't know either. But I noticed your formula. You have 50% of the weight on climatology. I was just curious why you were fading the models, or I guess splitting the models and such. Was there was there a particular reason for that? Like the models haven't performed well, or something else?
I don't believe so. I honestly don't remember. Do you remember in our text? No.
Not particularly. For our next forecast, I'll be a bit more involved, and I'll keep notes of why we made our forecast. So
Okay.
I'll bring that up at the next meeting we have.
That's fine. And I do know that Mr. David said that he's not going to be available this week. So he'll text us Monday and Tuesday.
We'll figure it
Sounds
out.
good. Well, let's see. I guess you guys have like one more minute here. Is there any final thoughts here from anyone before the students have to run?
How have the plumes been for the Euro and the CFS? Have they shown a lot of consistency between runs?
That's a good question for maybe Matt or someone who's looking at the models quite a bit. You mean like the ensemble members and such? Has there been consistency there?
Yeah.
Matt, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think there's been some general consistency on these warm views in the 16 to 20-day range. The CFS has been fairly consistent this week. I think if anything, it's been getting warmer and since Tuesday's update. So I think it's been fairly consistent. I haven't seen too much volatility, particularly on the CFS front. The Euro Weekly's only update one time between that update forecast and now, but yeah, I think they've been fairly consistent.
All right. Good to know. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions?
Well, great. I mean, I know some of the students have to run now. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, sir.
Okay, for those students who need to leave, please go, go ahead. And if some students are still here, we still have a few more minutes, so you're welcome to stay. And just we can talk about some other items. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks in terms of the next forecast discussion. And just remember for next week, we're starting Tuesday, we're switching over to HDDs. So you're forecasting in HDDs.
All right, Sarah, what program? Tell me about it.
I-
Yeah. Yes, Sarah, are you sticking on?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Go
There's
ahead.
gonna be 3 of us, me
Okay.
and a person in my group named Calvin, and then Clayton.
Yeah, I haven't been too involved lately because I've been trying to pass Calc 2.
Oh, I know how that is.
Yep. But I'm gonna try to be a bit more involved because I've got my study habits down to where I have free time to look at Maxar WeatherDesk. I'm more of a short range forecast person, so this is a bit new for me.
Yeah, I understand completely. This is new for me too. I am more of a prediction of severe weather.
Same.
Severe weather is my favorite, but it's really cool to be able to participate in this contest because, as we're all meteorologists or becoming meteorologists, we're learning more and more each and every single day.
Yeah, see, I'm kind of like that too. Like when I looked at my forecast stuff, I I kind of went synoptic style. I went like 2 days out. That was my initial
Mhm.
thought, was to go like 2 days out. And I know that couldn't work a little bit, but 2 weeks is, that can change.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a fair way to initially look at it, to see how models are doing in the short range. Because if they aren't doing well in the short range, then there's no point in using them for the long range because it's just trash outputs usually.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's why I was concerned about the plumes because, like we said, the CFS was kind of on track for once. I was wondering about how well each individual forecast has been verifying with the CFS because that might have just been a wildcard output as opposed to its previous outputs.
And maybe very rare too,
Mhm.
as they were discussing.
Yeah, broken clock is right twice a day.
That's right.
There's really only 2 sides to the forecast that we looked at. So it could very well have just been right by chance.
By the way, I think that's who, I'm sorry, I can't, who just made that comment?
That was Calvin, part
Yeah.
of the Direcos.
I'm gonna move over here so you guys.
Yeah,
can
I was gonna
see.
say, if you guys can come into the, yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that's great. That's great.
And I'm here, but yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying, Calvin, it was just a thought on that. I think that's a really great observation. I know that's something that I look at too. When you made the point about, hey, if you've got 2 models and you're forecasting, in the 16 to 20 or something like that, like not a day 1 forecast, and you for whatever reason you have a particular concern that one of the models is really wrong in the 6 to 10 or 11 to 15, like it's not handling something well before the 16 to 20, in my opinion, that could be a red flag, right? You're going to at least discount the forecast, right? Like a more specific example might be that, again, if model A is handling a track of a hurricane, that you think it's just way off base, like on day 6, 7, and 8, then I think it's a very reasonable approach to say I'm going to discount that solution in the 16 to 20. So I like how you're thinking about that.
So like if it's in the spaghetti models and it's varying significantly from the rest of the model blend, would it be fair to discount that probability? So for following where the hurricane would be in the next week or so, that area could potentially have, the model is completely useless for that area, and therefore by teleconnections, the entire run is pretty much nil.
Well,
So-
go ahead. Sure.
Would one system affecting a specific area that's not forecasted right completely ruin a model output in the future?
Yeah, that's so, because I almost thought you were saying 2 different things, but in terms of the first thing, if you have high confidence that let's say model A is not handling a major tropical system well, I think that could, I think that could be a red flag, right? Now, there's caveats to that, right? Like, if it's a tropical system in near Madagascar, it may not have a significant impact on North America. There's so many things that influence the models and stuff. So, it's possible that may not just ruin it, and you don't want to discount it because of that. On the other hand, if it's a recurving typhoon in the West Pacific, and you're confident that, again, it's wrong, like for whatever reason, you just think that solution is really, really off, then, knowing something about the fact that, hey, 10 days later, recurving typhoons tend to have a significant impact on the west-north, on the PNA pattern, i.e., United States pattern, then I think, there's more there, right? I mean, I'm still speaking qualitatively, we're not speaking in hard numbers, but still, like, there's more there where you're probably going to start thinking about discounting that model. But on the other hand, I wasn't sure if this is what you were saying, but let's say another scenario here where there's a model that just shows a wide distribution of tracks associated with a hurricane in the West Pac. But if you don't know it's wrong, like again, if you don't have, it could be right. Like it could be that there's so much uncertainty, right? That there might be another model that has higher certainty. Like it says, just 2 tracks going toward Japan. And this other model has tracks going all over the place. But if you don't have information that suggests one model is better than the other, that the Japanese track versus a wide distribution, then I certainly wouldn't discount the one that has a wide distribution. I mean, it's tempting. It's tempting to go with the model that appears to have higher confidence, right? But if we don't really know that it's going to perform better, it could steer you in the wrong direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's still important to consider that it does have wide distribution. So
yeah, exactly. Because if you think that model with the wide distribution has just as much chance to verify as the one with the smaller distribution, then I think that tells you that, yeah, they're they're unfortunately, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, the amount of possible outcomes is actually bigger. You should at least incorporate that into your forecast. And no one likes saying, at least I don't, like to a stakeholder, like a trader or something, like, hey, the range of outcomes is huge for this forecast, like from 5 CDDs to 50. Or I'm exaggerating, but no one likes saying that. You always feel better giving a more precise number, like, oh man, I feel really confident that this forecast is going to be around 45 HDDs. It just sounds better, right? You sound like you know what you're talking about and stuff like that. But we know in meteorology that that's just not how the world works. So you have to be able to convince that end user that what you're saying is actually the best information. And although it's sexier to say something like with the small range, there in a lot of cases the reality is, we know this, right, from looking at these 16 28 forecasts just in the last couple of weeks, right, that the reality is a lot of times you have to highlight that bigger distribution.
And my question is, so in terms of an end user, are you better off telling them that we don't exactly know what's going to happen, as opposed to we think this is most likely to happen, but this and this could also happen as well? So
yeah.
How do you convey that to the end user in the best way possible?
Well, one, and I'll turn it over to a couple other guys here too, because I've been talking, but one thought came to mind. I worked with meteorologists who I thought was really good at this. And what he used to do was he would almost always consistently, especially again, when we're talking like day 10 or day 15 or 20, 25 forecast where there's more risk in range, he would give 2 or 3 scenarios. And that's how he would do it. So he'd say, hey guys, I see, here are the 3 scenarios. Highest confidence on scenario A, that's like 60%. And in Missouri, it's going to be really cold in Missouri. Scenario B, I can kind of see it being slightly cold, and that's about a 20% chance. Scenario C, it's a low probability. It's whatever number is left, I forget, but 20%. But that's actually where it could be much above. And this is how you get there. So he would always lay that out. The 2 or 3 scenarios, maybe sometimes 4, he'd give probabilities, he'd give explicit numbers associated with that, and he'd even talk about the patterns associated with that. And I thought that was a good way. But I don't know, Dave or Michael or Matt, any other thoughts on that?
I think that's a great way, Dave. We changed a few years ago to do that for our month ahead and season ahead forecast. We do it the same way. We'll say, here's our preferred October forecast. This is what we think is going to happen, and here's why we think it's going to happen. And like you said, here's the numbers. But if we're wrong, and there might be a 30% chance that this much warmer situation could take place, and here's why and what we need to watch for that scenario. So yeah, that's perfect. I love that answer. Yeah.
So my question is that a good way to convey our forecast? So like when we give our forecast, we'll put up the map that shows what we are most confident in, but can we like write out our discussion as that?
I would love that personally. I would love to see that.
I feel like that would be the best way to show that we've been looking at the models and
Yeah.
actually doing our forecast.
And definitely mention that in the text and everything, even if we were to do like a video chat and like a Zoom call like this,
We
make
could-
sure you mention that too.
Yeah, we could
Yeah,
definitely take notes and make sort of a
Yeah.
brief sort of summary that shows those things.
exactly. That would be great, actually.
I love that. Yeah, that's a great.
Yeah. Like I said, I am studying Calc 2 right now, so my time is sort of limited, but I do look forward to being a part of this.
We look forward to for you helping.
Yeah.
So there you go.
My sort of usual thought process for long range forecasting is check how each model is doing in the short term. And that usually prioritizes what I think of the model's output. And I usually use plumes to determine how trustworthy a model is. So
That's a lot what I do too.
Mhm.
Those typically will verify because they're close.
yeah, that's
Do you
my
know if the other
methodology.
classes out there waiting on us, or because I know there's a computer
don't see
class.
anybody out
Okay, they may have canceled today.
Maybe.
Nobody out there.
We're just about I know people, it's Friday, right? It's happy hour. So where are there, but yeah, this is really good. I'm glad we had a few more minutes to talk about some of these items. I also want to, I'm not going to go through it now because I know we're at the top of the hour, but we added it's still a little bit, there's a couple kinks to work out, but we added mean absolute error to the forecast tables. You guys can take a look at that. We'll talk about maybe more next week, but mean absolute error is just another sort of metric to use, I think, to give you some, visibility on how you're performing and stuff. And it's a little bit more straightforward than the one we use traditionally, the CRPS. That's conditional rank probability score. So just look for that. We'll talk about that more next week. But before we go, are there any other parting thoughts from anyone? Anything we're forgetting?
I mean, I just have one more quick question.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm Eric. I'm part of the MU2 group. I stuck around.
He's with Lauren.
I'm with Lauren's group,
Oh.
Lauren Savoy. So there's so many different things we can look at. Is there like a certain way you guys recommend starting off? Like what would you look at first to kind of get an idea for each forecast?
Well, I'm going to let Matt and Dave talk about this. But before I forget, Michael created some nice videos. They're on the website. So that may be one place to start. They're short videos. Take a look. And I think Michael walks through the forecast process a little bit. But outside of that, I don't know, Dave or Matt, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, jump on real quick. This is Dave. That's a good question. I think it deserves an answer that's probably longer than a minute or two. Forecasters tend to kind of develop their own forecast process over time, and some of it's trial and error. There's no right recipe or wrong recipe. We all probably have a unique approach that it kind of gets just kind of, it's a little bit of on the job training, and I think you're getting a little bit of a sense right now just by asking that question of like, well, this is really difficult. The problem feels very, very big, and there's this plethora of data that we can look at, and really know how to make sense of it all. And I think that if I should just refer to this contest, right, there's something a little bit artificial we're doing here, which is you don't get to track it every day. You've got other things that you're worried about. You're doing Calc 2 homework. You're whatever you're doing with all your other classes. This is a little bit unique in that the forecast process, I feel like, unfolds over days and weeks, and when you follow it each day, then you're a little bit more kind of connected to the story, so to speak, right? It's like chapters of a book that unfolds. But walking into it cold is a difficult thing. And so what you're doing here, all of you are doing, is undertaking a challenge that is difficult because it's very difficult forecast based, as you'll really learn now in the next couple of weeks and month, going into heating degree day season, how badly we might do in the 16 to 20 day. But you'll get a sense for like, it's just difficult to put that book down and then pick it up on, say, a Monday or Tuesday morning. But to answer the question, I think it's, you've got some resources like the CFS, you've got some resources like the European Weeklies. If you can get a sense kind of how they've been tracking, or at least get a sense of how they may have changed over the last week or two in terms of kind of like these longer frame time periods, like weeks 2 and 3, then you might get a sense. Have a discussion with your team leader. I think it's important sometimes to identify kind of the base state of the atmosphere. Are we in like a warm base state atmosphere or a cold base state atmosphere? What may be driving that? Could it be an MJO feature? Could it be a recurving typhoon? Could it be increasingly now as we go into winter, like things in the stratosphere or high latitude blocking? Can you get a sense of some of the building blocks? Like, what are you putting together to kind of make this forecast? Like, it's not that dissimilar to making a forecast for, say, 2 or 3 days ahead. Kind of like, what are the building blocks that you're using? Now, you have a lot less model data than you have in the short term, but you still have a lot of model data. And you do have to kind of suss out maybe what maybe you think is valuable and what you don't. And that sometimes is a little bit of experience in terms of just working with that data. And you're not going to get a full appreciation for that, but maybe have a discussion with your team leaders on kind of like, what are the 2 or 3 things that are kind of like driving this atmosphere? And I think from there, you get to a sense of maybe, well, if that doesn't happen, then how does it go wrong? So I think what Matt said is very important, which is that, you paint 3 scenarios, and Matt does a very good job of this in his reports on these timeframes, in the sense of, hey, I think this is the most likely scenario, and this is why it should play out this way for these few reasons. But if one of those pieces of that foundation isn't intact, let's say the MJO fails, or there isn't a recurving typhoon, or the blocking doesn't show up, then maybe the forecast could start to look like this. But I think your team leaders could all assist you on maybe identifying those 3 or 4 features. Sometimes it's, sometimes you don't know what the main features are, right? That's the difficulty of making forecasts at this time frame. You don't really know what might be playing out, in that time frame. But maybe identify those 2 or 3 key features, 4 key features. Well, what is the kind of like what is the atmosphere working with, right? This was a time period when Michael talked at the beginning about how this verified quite cold, but that's against the backdrop of a very mild period. We've been a hot period, actually, going back to about the end of the first, early second week of August. Now into early October, we're in a very warm pattern. And that was a kind of a little bit of a freakish 5-day window where it was cold. May have been the typhoon, may not, but it was a colder window that was kind of wedged in. The low frequency pattern has been really warm, and it's going to be close to two months or more once we get out here into mid-October. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that does a little bit, yeah.
Okay.
And I'll add in a couple of things here as well, since I don't have as much experience doing this as either of the Daves. They've been doing this for a lot longer than I have. But when I started out, I kind of made a what I would call a mistake, trying to get a little too fancy, because I tried to use the MJO forecast to come up with my number, and that didn't really work out too well for me. So the point being of why I'm saying that is, I think it's better to kind of start out the way you guys are starting out, relatively, simple, easy to understand stuff, 50% Dynacast, 50% CPC, climatology, and the models. I think that's how you should definitely start out making your forecasts. And then if you want to add in something like, say, maybe you want the BSR, the Bering Sea rule, I believe, teleconnections, maybe you want to add more CPC, 3-4 week forecast, maybe you want to add something in totally different, maybe MJO analog. I think, you can start adding that in slowly. You don't want to start off, giving that a whole 50% weighting, having never used it before and not being familiar with it. You want to start off maybe 5-10%. And, kind of once you get the hang of using it, something like an MJO analog tool, then, you can start upping that percentage as you get more confident with it, or maybe you can remove it completely. Don't be afraid to, if something's not working, don't be afraid to get rid of it. But that my point being that, just kind of when you start to look at some of these things like the teleconnections, MJO, La Nina, El Nino, things like that, go with them slowly. Don't, just jump in 50% El Nino or La Nina conditions and call it a day. You're gonna end up burned more often than not.
I appreciate that advice too.
Well, thanks, that helps, guys. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing too, and I think I've shared this with my team a little bit, which is that at the end of the day, we're coming up with a number, and that's how you'll get scored and ranked. Don't get hung up on that as much. Maybe Dave Margolin might disagree with me on this a little bit, but and that's how you have to get graded and all that. But I think it's also important that the justification, and that speaks back to Michael's point he just made, which is that methodology is kind of important, and being able to tell the story is important, right? And so, we're a customer of Matt Rogers. We subscribe to his data and his products, and so, Matt's not always making perfect forecasts, but I think it's important always that if Matt's telling the story and giving the justification, that to me is much more important than actually getting a number right. The number it's just one single data point, and at the end of the day, it may or may not be important, but I'd emphasize we don't get hung up on the numbers as much as we do maybe with the process or about the learning about how does the atmosphere work in this time frame, the challenge that you have in predicting at this time frame, and how you communicate those challenges. That to me are the bigger takeaways.
Yeah, and that kind of harkens back to what I said at the start of the meeting, where Dr. Lupo's score might not have been the best, but his verification map was pretty spot on overall.
He
So
has a very large blend of a bunch of different things, and that kind of shows his experience, right?
yeah. I mean, I'm sure he's been doing forecasting for I don't know how long, but he's you don't get to be a professor in meteorology without some type of experience. So but yeah, I mean, I've been doing this for a couple of years, and my methodology is still, it might look complicated, but that's fairly simple stuff still. So if you want to get into the complicated areas, people like Dr. Lupo, I think Matt Lanza on occasion has something complicated in there. I don't know if he's forecasted recently, but one of our other participants, Philip Ye, he also one of our top performers usually. He also has a lot of complicated stuff in his forecast, a lot of tropical things. Usually, if you want to go back, take a look, one of these, he's in one of those months. It'd be a good idea to maybe read one of his forecasts, just to kind of see what like a really comprehensive forecast looks like. Let me see if I can find one.
So do each of these lists show how the actual models did in verification? Is that what the listing of the Euro and the CFS are?
Yeah, so for this, in this particular August 18th to 22nd, this gives the CRPS score for the Euro and the CFS. Obviously the CFS performed a lot worse, at least from a CRPS perspective. And then in the official summary and sandbox summaries for the cooling season, you can see how it's doing overall. And then these will give you the week-to-week kind of statistics.
Yeah, you see the verification scores at the bottom usually. There it is, 54, not verification score, the verification 54.5 or whatever it was.
Yeah, it looks like Philip has been a little bit missing this year, but still a very good score comparatively.
Yeah, and so all these things, I think it's sort of to be continued. I think a lot of these things we can talk a little bit about on a week-to-week basis in terms of, different things to incorporate into your forecast process. Unfortunately, there's no perfectly, secret sauce, but we can provide tips and ideas on a weekly basis.
Yeah, there's still a lot of data to look at. Maxar Weather Desk has all sorts of stuff you can consider.
Yeah.
And I haven't played with it too much either. I usually use the College page, and I used to use I think it's the GEFS plumes, but that got privatized recently.
Oh, that's nice.
One of the public plumes websites got
I use Shrat.
taken offline very recently.
I use Shrat, and I think that still works. I think you're talking about the gas plumes.
Yeah, I think that's the one that took off, right?
I haven't used that one, so I guess I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
Use anyone.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of good stuff on the Maxar site. Definitely encourage you guys to take a look at that. That's, normally customers have to pay, whatever, 20,000 a year or something like that to have a subscription. So it's really cool that Maxar is allowing that for us, and definitely soak it up. It's fun too. I mean, if you guys are weather weenies like us, and I'm guessing you are, there's just so much awesome weather data there. Like if you just want to geek out. So have some fun with it, and I think it'll help out too.
Yeah, and just to kind of piggyback quickly on Dave's comment, because I know you guys probably want to get out of here at this point. Checking out the info reports on Maxar is usually another great starting point, because they'll kind of highlight, if I can just pull it up real quick, they'll kind of highlight, areas of interest. Zoom in. So, they mention GLAM, that's a discussion for another time, PDO, they mention the EC, some forecast risks from the CPC, positive EPO, all that great stuff. And, it can be a great, if you want to kind of sift through all of that information, because it is a lot of information to go through. This is kind of like a good starting point to see where the professionals are, if you can't contact your pod leader that week, this is their official forecast. This is what people see. So that's where you would want to start to see where the big ticket items are for that particular period.
So will these like energy reports be in similar range to what we're forecasting for?
Yes. So this one in particular is the 16 to 20. This one was issued Friday, so today. But you can go back and look through. So if I wanted September, when did we make this forecast? Was it like September 28th? No, 6th.
So
So you
this
can
is
go.
something that when we're doing our forecast, we can look at and like use to our advantage.
Yeah. So
No cheating. There's no cheating. So, just make sure you check out their industry number one in the forecast table. So if you want to see how they're doing, you can go see how they're doing. But they issue these forecasts Monday through Friday. And like Michael said, it's absolutely basically what, you should find when you open this up on Tuesday, their number that they have in there, they have their Maxar number, official number. Yeah, right there. That should be the exact number that you see in our forecast contest. If not, there's a bug. And let me know. But no, it should be the same. So yeah, I would definitely, that's a great point, Michael. Definitely encourage you guys to read these things. Their qualitative assessment and stuff like that could give you real tips and ideas in terms of things that you want to incorporate into your forecast process.
Yeah, and they also, for what it's worth, they give the range for the models as well. So, CFS as low as, I'm going to guess that's about 10 to as high as 60. And, you got the Euro and then the last 50 years as well. So a lot of great stuff in here. Definitely recommend looking at that.
So that weighted outlook down there, is that useful similar to how you use plumes or what?
So as far as I understand this, I would say that essentially, yes. I don't know if it's I don't really use plumes all that often, so I can't say for sure, but essentially this is just giving you the range of the models. So in that sense, it's similar. Other than that, I'm not too sure. But it does give, it can, if it's a large range, you can see that the CFS is colder, the range is about the same as the EC. So nothing crazy there, but you might see some forecasts. I think I've seen a couple where the range is huge. So that can be helpful as well.
This is nationally weighted, so a huge range could indicate a very volatile pattern, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or the model's having difficulty, resolving something, and it gets back to that, like we were saying, like Dave was saying earlier, with the typhoon hitting Japan. The EC might have a better handle on that pattern, or the CFS might be correct, and there might be a huge amount of volatility. It's you can't use just the two models to kind of make that distinction, but that is certainly a possibility that you should always keep in mind.
So a wide range on there doesn't necessarily mean a model is wrong.
No, I don't think, it could still, technically, if you fall within the range, the model is still, correct in some form. It gets a little complicated because, like I was saying, if the EC had a range between 40 and 55, but the CFS had a range between 20 and 70, well, you don't know for sure that 20 to 70 range is just outright wrong. In the same way you don't know that the EC, just because it's got a smaller range, is correct, if that makes sense, because like the EC could just be honing in on one particular thing too close. I think it was Matt Rogers or Dave D'Arcangelo, or maybe they both mentioned it, where the EC kind of reverts back to that La Nina base state. So it could just be overly confident in that La Nina base state, whereas the CFS is picking up on something that the Euro is kind of washing out at the overall pattern. So you don't know necessarily that the larger range model is going to be incorrect just because it has a larger range. That doesn't necessarily, make sense when you think about it, because you think, oh, larger range, it's got to have no idea what it's doing. But it does indicate, usually when we're in the 16 to 20 day pattern, it's going to be a lot of volatility, no matter which way you spin it, usually.
Yeah.
Because that's 3 weeks out, basically. It's, we can barely, when it comes to Northeast snowstorms, we barely have 3 days without it changing half a dozen times. So, but, so keeping, the main point where I'm going with this is you can look at it so that a wide spread, be wary of the wide spread, but also be wary of the short spread, because they could both be wrong, basically.
Yeah, that makes more sense. Thanks for explaining that.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, I'm out of questions.
I've got nothing. That was really cool.
And maybe, yeah, that might be a good place to leave it. I would say let's maybe continue the conversation about model diagnostics and model calibration, because that is a little bit of a complicated subject, but it's a great subject. And I think really, really important. So, but that, maybe we'll leave it there for now. Yeah, thanks everyone for joining and for the extended time. Again, we'll be here next week. So at the same, bat channel. It's not our official, class thing, but you guys are welcome to join and we can continue to have some of these conversations. If not, we'll see you guys in 2 weeks time. How's that sound?
Awesome.
That
Sounds good.
And I'll
All right.
be sure to communicate more in our group, David, because I know I haven't talked a whole lot in there.
That's okay.
All right, that's great. Well, thank you guys for a great discussion. Have a good
Yeah,
weekend.
and thank y'all so much. I may be the speaker from now on. Dr. Lupa may make me do this. So, and I'm okay with that. This is cool.
It works. You're doing a
Yeah,
great
it
job.
works.
So we'll see you.
All right. Y'all have a good weekend.
All right, you too.
Thanks, you too.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.